Okay, so in theory, that is now recording. Yes, I can see the red button there on the screen. Okay, so back to the beginning. So this is about bouncing forward to a one planet region and the notion of social tipping points, which is something we have talked about before. I'm going to talk about the unexpected environmental and health benefits that, that some of us at least are seeing. I want to just reference the fact this isn't the only pandemic. There are other things out there, so we shouldn't get too overwhelmed by COVID, even though we're in the midst of it. And then this notion of roaring forward, not back, or bouncing forward, not back. You'll see why I refer to roaring forward in a minute. Social tipping points, and then what does that mean for a one planet region? So, I mean, everybody's been reading and seeing about this, that people in India are reporting they can see the Himalayas, dramatic reductions in India and other places around the world. This is a couple of pictures that some of you may have seen of people who can actually, for the first time in 30 years, see the Himalayas. And then this one was actually from Punjab. So people are seeing this everywhere, dramatic reductions, and of course we're seeing it from space too. This is nitrogen dioxide levels in China between January and February 2020, and this is early and late March in Italy, and this is early and late March in France, and this is March, basically March and the first week of April in 2019 in the US compared to 2020, and they aren't even really quite into it yet. So we're seeing a lot of this sort of change going on. I came across this, which I rather liked in a National Geographic article a week or so ago. People so accustomed to pollution they hardly think about it may realize, actually, I really do quite enjoy clean air. Do you think I could get it or keep it? And I think that's what a lot of people are starting to say. And it's not just clean air. I liked this quote, which Rick Cool shared with me from one of his former students who's in Kathmandu. The air quality is so much better here, and I can hear so many more songbirds in the morning. I'm loving it. And I actually came across a reference quite recently. They're talking about seismographers who are able now to measure earthquakes they couldn't previously measure because they were obscured by the noise in urban areas. And urban noise levels, because they monitor this stuff for seismography, are down anywhere from 30 to 60%. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. And then there's some, and obviously, just to go back for a moment to the respiratory stuff, that has implications for very high rates of death and disease related to air pollution. In fact, some people have suggested that there may be more lives saved through reductions in air pollution in China than have been lost to COVID. Not sure where the numbers will come down when we finally get around to crunching it, but the point is there are losses and there are gains in this process. This is road accidents. So 39% down in France compared to a year ago, both the number of accidents and the number of deaths about 40% down. In California, about half down. Washington State, big drops. So we're seeing some unexpected, or I mean, if we thought about it, we'd have known, but we're seeing benefits that people hadn't really thought about. We're also seeing, and not everyone is going to see this as a benefit, but global GDP is shrinking. The CASA is the Center for the Advancement of the Steady State Economy, and they have a GDP meter. If you go online, you see the numbers on the meter ticking up by the millisecond of global GDP. But they're actually putting it into reverse at a rate of 20% per annum. And if you want to see why that's a good thing, if you don't already know, and I'm sure this group already does, then you can see it in this article here on the Steady State Herald, which is their newsletter. Apologies to a couple of people just joining who I didn't notice were waiting. And then this one, also from that same article, biodiversity loss is as solid an indicator of economic activity as GDP itself. So when GDP goes down, wildlife wins. So we've got some really interesting sort of side effects or benefits really of COVID that are people are beginning to realize and notice. Then of course, I think this is really important. It's not the only pandemic. So yeah, COVID is a serious pandemic. I'm not trying to play it down. The best case in Canada, you can see there. The worst case could be a whole lot more. We seem to be closer to the best case track at the moment, thank goodness. Globally, even in the best case, it's going to kill 2 to 10 million, let's say, in round numbers. And in the worst case, 40 million, and my guess would be that that's an underestimate. So it's a very serious epidemic with millions, perhaps tens of millions of deaths globally. But the good news, if you like, and I probably should have put good news in inverted commas, but it is good news, is that it will probably only do it just the once unless it becomes endemic or unless it develops multiple mutations, which this kind of virus, I gather, tends not to. So it's only going to hit us once. It's going to cause millions of deaths, and then it's probably going to be relatively quiescent. But there's a whole bunch of other infectious pandemics out there that, and you know, what Donald Trump has just done. I liked, incidentally, Richard Horton, the editor of The Lancet, was very blunt. He said what Donald Trump had done in defunding the WHO was a crime against humanity, which is something I completely concur with. So, but one of the things that cut does is it undermines WHO's work to address these other infections. Are you
interested in this or not?
Whoever has got their microphone open would probably...
The Zoom meeting conversations. It's on.
Whoever it is that has their microphone open is just speaking.
Trevor, that's why you have that button.
What are you looking at?
Sometimes you just have to be in charge.
Yeah, okay.
You're in your emails.
I think we're okay. So, if you look at these, which are the vaccine-preventable diseases, TB, malaria, diarrhea, HIV, AIDS, you're looking at a total very similar to the millions of deaths from COVID, except that this happens every year. So over the period of a few years, you're going to have a much bigger toll than the one-off low estimate, even the high estimate of COVID. And this occurs in other areas. So there's what you could think of as a poverty pandemic. Social injustice kills people on a grand scale. And again, every year, it's not one-off. And then there's what I've begun to call the industrial society pandemics. We've already talked about air pollution. A very recent study that was published in the European Society of Cardiology estimates an extra almost 9 million premature deaths a year. That is a kind of mid-level estimate for what COVID might do. And road deaths, which we've touched on already, 1.35 million a year, going up probably to 3.5 million a year. 5.5 million of those deaths are from air pollution are preventable in the opinion of the authors. And both of these have been termed pandemics by the European Society of Cardiology in the first place, the Pulitzer Center in the second. But again, these are things that happen every year, year out. And then there's pollution. Pollution, it's been estimated, causes 9 million premature deaths in 2015. Much of that is air and water pollution, so covered by some of the stuff I've already talked about. But there's a whole lot of other impacts of pollution that we don't even measure the health effects of, either because we haven't yet quantified their health impacts or because we don't even know what their health impacts are yet. So the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health a couple of years ago said that these 9 million deaths could be just the tip of a much larger iceberg. And again, it's every year, year in, year out. So while COVID is important, it's a really bad idea to address the consequence of one pandemic by worsening the impact of others. And so what we're going to be seeing as we start to open up the economy again is we're actually going to bring back those road deaths, those air pollution deaths, those other deaths that are happening as a consequence of the way we operate. Which brings me to this notion of roaring forward, not roaring back. This was Trudeau a week ago. Our country will come roaring back. I've actually just written a column that'll be out on Sunday based on that. Because of course, the last thing we want to do is roar back to the problem that we already had. So there's this notion of resilience, not as bouncing back to the way we were before, not rebuilding your community in the floodplain after the flood, but moving your community, moving your economy, in this case, bouncing forward to something better rather than back. And interestingly enough, and I covered this in one of my columns recently, so I won't dwell on it at length, but there's quite a body of evidence, not just this one paper that I'm quoting here from a few years ago, that that in the recessions and in the depressions, population health actually improves for most things. Suicide does go up, but most other things do better, whereas years of strong economic growth are associated with either worsening health or a slowing of the secular improvements, the over time improvements in health. So what they concluded, what they found is that population health tends to evolve better in recessions than in expansions. It was actually noted a long time ago, and there have been a number of more recent studies looking at the latter half of the 20th century that show the same thing. So when we talk about let's come roaring back, you need to think about the health impacts of roaring back. Do we really want to roar back to expanding fossil use, poor air quality, motor vehicle crashes, pollution, busy, stressful lives, hastening resource depletion, accelerating species extinctions? I think these are really important questions we need to be asking and very relevant to the whole notion of how we become a one planet region. I liked the way Bill Rees put it in this article in the Tyee a couple of weeks ago. Normal is the pathology now. And so if we don't want to bounce back to a pathological situation, he had this wonderful curve, a curve that really needs flattening. And that's the one planet living line, which is the blue line, and how much we're likely in the status quo scenario to exceed that before we crash, as opposed to what he calls planned contraction for sustainability. So that's a really interesting way for us, perhaps, as we talk about this, to present this to the people we're talking with. So takes me to the notion of social tipping points. Will Stefan, who's one of the leading figures in the Stockholm Resilience Centre and a lot of the work that important group has done on the Anthropocene, commented that we need to reach a social tipping point before we reach a planetary one. And he was basing that in part on the work they have done recently around around climate change and the potential for tipping points. So in my column a couple of weeks ago, I pointed to 8 possible social tipping points. So I won't go through these at length, but just to remind you, some of us at least, perhaps many, I don't know, be interesting to find out, are finding quality of life can be better. Being less busy is not so bad. We're also seeing that we pay a huge price for our way of life, and that many people far away pay a much greater price. We're also learning, and I think this is again one of the real points we want to push on, exponential growth is a really bad idea, whether it's viruses or carbon dioxide molecules, or any of the other things that are exponentially growing like the economy. Fourthly and fifthly, government matters and social solidarity matters. I think it's really fascinating to look at what's been happening in the US compared to the Canadian peace, order and good government approach. We are outperforming them in so many ways. I think it's so interesting that Trudeau, for example, this morning, and yet again, I heard him talking about working with the provinces. whereas all that Trump seems to want to do is fight the states. It's such a different approach, and worth emphasizing. And I'll come back to that point about the importance of government in a minute. We're certainly learning that local matters a lot, local stores, businesses, neighbours, local parks, and so on. And then there's this notion, and I'm going to come in a minute to a quote from Eric, but I'll prefigure it, that if we can, basically, if we can act this way for one emergency, why can't we do it for another? So I think there's a number of ways, and finally this one, that nature bats last. And I liked this quote that the Times Colonist reprinted from the Chicago Tribune a couple of weeks ago. We learn anew that in nature we're but temporary components of perpetual systems much bigger than ourselves. So I think there's a number of these social tipping points, or social realizations, if you like, that could become social tipping points. I don't think yet they are social tipping points, but they could become social tipping points. And then the idea that comes out of that, we know from climate change science that there's the possibility of a tipping point triggering a cascade of further tipping points. That's why Will Stephan made his comment about a planetary tipping point. But what we've started to think about, and I've been doing some work with Thomas Homer Dixon, I'll come to in a minute, is how do we trigger a cascade of positive changes in society? And so if you haven't yet heard this, Thomas Homer Dixon, who's well known perhaps to many of you, as it says on this slide, an award-winning scholar and author, very interesting guy, and he's moved out here and he's set up the Cascade Institute, which is going to be at Royal Roads. And it's all about interventions for rapid global change, just starting to get going. I'm going to be on the Science Advisory Board, and I know Rick Cool, who's on the call, has been working with him. This is a quote from their background information. A series of precisely targeted and timed interventions could plausibly produce a virtuous cascade of change. So in a sense, what we're trying to do is trigger that virtuous cascade of change through those social tipping points, through the idea that was in our announcements around the Seeds project. And we want to work with a number of different groups to identify what are the seeds of a one planet region. And so that brings me to the notion, to close, of the idea of a one planet region. I'm wondering about whether there's an emerging new normal. And some of these things, and I'm sure there are many others, I just threw down the first few that came to mind. People are learning to telecommute and figuring out it's not so bad. There's more, I think, buying local, although there's also a lot of ordering of but certainly I think we're seeing the importance of local business and local stores, local responses. There's people trying to grow local. There's certainly less consumption going on. There's more, I think, social solidarity, people spending a lot of time outdoors, people starting to talk about what used to be quite radical ideas of guaranteed annual income. There was an interview on NPR News yesterday with the head of one of the largest hedge funds in the US. And he said, well, we've just implemented a basic income for Americans. Now, the way they're doing it is not the way we're doing it, but it's interesting that he'd even be thinking about that. And in fact, there's this quote, radical reforms reversing the prevailing policy direction of the last 4 decades, in other words, basically ditching neoliberalism, will need to be put on the table. Governments will have to accept a more active role. They must see public services as investments rather than liabilities. Look for ways to make labour markets less insecure. Redistribution will again be on the agenda, the privileges of the elderly and wealthy in question. Policies until recently considered eccentric, such as basic income and wealth taxes, will have to be in the mix. Okay, so which radical red rag wrote such dangerous piffle? The editorial board of the Financial Times. You see something like that and you realize some important things are starting to shift out there. So these are some of the sort of signs in the wind, I think, of the possibility of tipping towards that better future. This is from the Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, talking about put at the heart of stimulus packages, measures to speed up clean energy transitions and boost energy resilience. Then we have the Secretary General of the UN a couple of weeks ago. We simply cannot return to where we were before COVID-19 struck. The recovery must lead to a different economy. I mean, these are powerful statements from people in influential positions. And so this was Eric's quote: "If we can change everything for one kind of emergency, why not do it for another?" And it's what I would call smart resilience. So roaring back to where we were, or bouncing back to where we were, I would call stupid resilience. We need smart resilience. We need to move forward, or roar forward, or bounce forward to a better future. And so that's where I'm going to end. I'll come back to this later in terms of possible discussion questions and put it up when we get into discussion. But those are my thoughts on all of this. I see that there's a bunch of comments which I have not had time to monitor in the chat box. But what I'd like to do is to turn it over to Francis and then Cora and then our board to add any thoughts from their end first, and then we'll throw it open to everyone for discussion for the next hour and a half, really. So Francis.
You're muted, Francis.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeedy.
It's a bit confusing because the button comes up and says mute, which I thought it meant I was muted. I thought I got rid of that. So anyways, to the point, fantastic. Once again, Trevor knocked it out of the park. You were always right on point, and I love that you have the opportunity to share that with readers in the Times Colonist as the way you do. And we're delighted that Creatively United, who I'm speaking for, is a social sharing hub for those of you who may not be aware of it, a community social sharing hub of solution-based, creative solution-based ways for lighter living. And we are having an upcoming Earth Fest. I see Guy Dauncey's on the line. Guy will be one of our presenters, as will Trevor. We have an amazing week ahead. Can I share my screen and just give you a sense of what's coming up, Trevor?
Yep, let me just.
I think I can just, can you see that? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep, there we are.
So it's up. And if your photos happen to be in the way of the screen, you can just put your cursor on it and you can move them out of the way. You can move them to the bottom so you can read what's here. All right. So you'll see there's really an incredible lineup. I don't know how many of you know who Bob Sanford is, but he's kicking things off this Sunday. And he's talking very much to the point of what Trevor had to say. And this man is the author of 35 books. He's from Canmore, Alberta. He's a United Nations climate and water specialist. And he told me in a pre-interview I had with him that despite him speaking all over the world, that he considers this Sunday to be one of the most important talks that he's ever given in his entire career. So he really is somebody worth tuning into, and he's really going to set the stage, much like Trevor has right now. And Trevor, as you noticed, if you scroll down our schedule, or if you move your pictures and can see the bottom of the schedule, you'll see Trevor concludes the week, which is very fitting. And Guy is right in there on Tuesday with his new ecological civilization, which is just I've had a little preview of what's to come, and talk about inspirational. So we've already got close to 500 registrants from all over the world. We've got even people from India tuning into this. So we really have an opportunity to take the void that's happening right now and fill it with something extremely positive. I think people are more willing, as Trevor said, than ever to look at this maybe now and really kind of bring this conversation forward. And every single person who is presenting here will be giving their audience something to really take home and to start considering or to start doing immediately. So it is an action-based kind of discussion. And Todd, I see you're on the call. I always love what you have to write and share. And as you know, even though we couldn't get everybody onto our EarthFest Live, what I would like you to know is that we are going to continue after on Wednesdays with a series. Every Wednesday, it'll be 1 hour. And we're going to hopefully bring on many of the amazing minds that are on this program right now, watching this webinar with Trevor and all of us, to share. And so it's going to be an ongoing Wednesday series for creative solutions for a new world. So there'll be other opportunities, but this is the kickoff. And these will be from 11 a.m. to 12:30 daily, starting this Sunday, free of charge. There's no barrier to entry, but you do need to register, and they will be a webinar. So we won't be seeing everybody's faces or microphones and have the opportunity to, have any interruption or Zoom bombers. We'll have a really clean program, but with the opportunity to get questions answered. So I invite you all. I really hope you'll share this. Go to creativelyunited.org, or you can send me an email and I can send you all the links, and you can share it with your network. Because the more people that are hearing this information, Creatively United has always maintained, the more people that hear this and share this, the more this conversation becomes second knowledge to people. It's not going to be like anything is unusual about having this conversation. This is what we need to keep promoting, as you all know, and that's why we're all on this call together. So thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Francis. And if you want to release the screen, and Cora, we will go to you for your comments. So I should just say the context, particularly for Francis and Cora, is that the three of us, the three organizations, so the Conversations, Creatively United, and One Planet Saanich, have started talking with each other at how we can more effectively work together. We're really pretty much the only organizations that are taking a big sort of full Anthropocene, full global change perspective at a local level. And so we want to make sure we work together in ways that are productive, and we each have complementary sets of interests and skills. And so we're starting to figure out how do we do this much better together.
Great. And it's been an amazing partnership so far. It's been really great working with all of you. There's a few people on the line I haven't met yet, so I'm happy to be here and getting a chance to talk with all of you. So as Trevor mentioned, I'm Cora Hallsworth, leading up One Planet Saanich. And I can give you more details about that later another time, or we have a website, oneplanetsaanich.org, if you wanted more information about that. Trevor, that was an amazing presentation that you've brought together a lot of information from some deep thinkers, and I haven't had the time myself to kind of read a lot of this, so it's always great to hear your take on things and all the research you've done. And I think really I'd just reiterate some of the points you've already made, Trevor. Also, I'll share my screen in a little minute and share some of the ideas we had generated from our One Planet Saanich team a few weeks ago. We had a bit of a brainstorm as well, so I'll show you that quickly. But in general, I think right now, like using an old cliche, challenge presents an opportunity. So we're in the midst of a pretty massive challenge that completely applies to our current reality. So I think all of us on this call have been thinking about what are the opportunities that this health crisis is presenting to us. And my head is still spinning on this, to be honest, still trying to, figure out how we focus. And I think groups like this, bringing us all together and all the mental capacity here, there's a huge brain trust here. And Trevor just demonstrated that with his presentation, figuring out how to move forward with this, also in a way of, staying mentally healthy And I think in being mentally healthy through this, a great way to do that is to find the positive in what we're experiencing. So there's a lot of positive opportunity spaces, and what Francis is doing with Creatively United event next week is a huge focus on the positive. So looking forward to that. So I've been finding this is definitely a time to reflect. We're having a definite slowdown for many of us, not for some, but many of us are slowing down. And so these periods of time are when we can come up with some creative solutions. So Isaac Newton, this is when he was in the midst of a pandemic, when he figured out gravity, apparently. So lots of opportunity to figure out creative solutions to our sustainability challenges that we've been talking about for many years. And slowing down is definitely sustainable. As Trevor mentioned, we're seeing less pollution, more time to spend with our immediate family, reaching out to other people in virtual means. So in a nutshell, I think this slowing down is all about lighter living. So we're seeing lighter living in action in many cases. So we're being kind of forced into it. So hopefully we can carry some of these trends forward, the good side of things that have been happening. So this lighter living lifestyle, hopefully we can keep it going as we move into the recovery phase. And as our things have been shutting down across most of our economy, so there's this opportunity to kind of explore alternatives and forge a new path. So number one on my list would be redirecting the subsidies that we have, inherent in our system, which are contributing to polluting practices, shifting these subsidies to a new, greener economy. There's going to be a lot of stimulus. It's already started. There's stimulus funding out there and programs that are coming down the pipes. So whatever we can do to encourage those senior levels of government to direct this money to this greener alternative, and also the companies that are out there, helping them explore alternative ways. So I think one key part of that is how do we mobilize the masses to join this conversation and encourage others, encourage government, encourage business, encourage other people to overcome the entrenched industry leaders that always have a stronger voice than ours. So mobilizing the masses, I think, a key opportunity that we should look at pursuing. So I think the other key piece was how this pandemic is exposing the stratification of our society. So most of us, I think, here lead privileged lives, so that we're not at as much risk to experience a lot of the negative impacts. Other people in society are experiencing a lot more than us. So really need to focus on equity and health. And with our One Planet Saanich model, we do have a strong emphasis on health and equity and well-being, as I know Trevor does as well. So let's have this as a messaging to focus everybody on. And let's not rebound into often there is a rebound effect in situations like this, and the economy will, start soldiering on and focus on increasing GDP. So that is some sort of a risk that we need to address. And let's just focus on this slower, lighter and more thoughtful life. So I just rambled on there, and I do want to share with you sorry, you're seeing the wrong part here. So we did a bit of hopefully we'll be having a bit of a discussion like this, Trevor. I don't know what you've got intended here, but we did this exercise with One Planet Saanich participants 2 weeks ago, and we just did a bit of a doodle about what's happening locally right now. What are the things that are happening to us during this crisis, and how can we learn from that in building a One Planet city and region? And probably this text on here is too small for you to read in many cases, but and I can share this as well. So I think we should just continue to evolve from these conversations and figure out how to, transform our society. So this, I have another one too. I could put this up. I'll put the other one up as well. So the other question I asked of the participants, what can we focus on now? So looking at food security was a big one. Transitioning to a different business, getting away from the business as usual, and have a focus on education and learning. So lots of great ideas to build from, and hopefully we can all be strategic in figuring out how to move things forward. So I'll end there and stop talking. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you very much. Let me just invite the other members of the board that are online. That is Claire, Alan, and Jasmindra. I don't think Savannah is on, but Savannah, if she is on, to add their thoughts or comments. And I know Claire in particular, so maybe we'll start with Claire, was going to talk a little bit about our plans for online kitchen table conversations.
Yeah, I thought actually that was a perfect segue from Cora when you said, how do we mobilize the masses? And the thing is that there is so much wisdom in the community at the grassroots that we don't have good mechanisms for bringing what they have to say to the table. And one of the things that we had before the pandemic hit, we were working on putting together what's called, and it's been used in communities all over the world, kitchen table conversations in a more formalized way. And essentially just getting people together as a group to usually over food, and then having a conversation both as a way of creating community, but also to talk about the issues that are important to them. So instead of continuing to develop, well, we will continue to develop that, but we thought we would put together one that was a little bit more rough and ready, that could follow straight on from this presentation, that people could take to their communities, whether they were block watches or neighborhoods, people on your street, or just parent-teacher groups, or just whatever communities you're connected into, both as a way of doing something online. So using some kind of platform, we've found it good to use Zoom, but you might have a different one, but both as a way of connecting with people and seeing how they're doing. And then we put together a series of potential questions, but so that we're grasping what's happening at the local level, and we can grab that wisdom and then bring it forward. So we will, it's not quite ready to go, but we should have it ready to go in the next, I would say, week. Do you agree with that, Trevor?
Sorry, I need to unmute myself. Yes, we're hoping to get that up and going fairly quickly. And I actually, if we can do it, it'd be nice to have the website launched at the same time so we can link people back into the website. And part of it is to also ask people if they're willing to share what they've been discussing, probably through the website, so that we can learn from all of that.
Yeah.
So Alan and then Jasmindra, any thoughts to add or points to make?
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I think I have my mute.
You're on.
Yep, good. Just a couple of simple thoughts that occurred to me in my walk this morning. They arose as a result of an article I read recently about what to look forward to when things finally come roaring back, to use Justin Trudeau's terminology. And I think that's likely to become almost the slogan for every major corporation that is trying to grab our attention. It's time to come roaring back. You deserve a break. You need a holiday. By gosh, that new car, if you can afford it, is looking pretty good now. Interest rates are low. Let's go for it. And it is frightening to me, because if that's what we're going to meet, I think it might have some attraction for a fair number of people. The simple thought that I have, though, kind of ties into what Claire was talking about a moment ago, kitchen table conversations. I was doing my walk this morning and I thought to myself, okay, if I was going to sit down with my group of whoever, friends, acquaintances, maybe family members, what might be worth talking about? 2 questions I think are worth considering by everyone. The first one, what do I value the most that is now missing or drastically altered since mid-March? Second question, what will I want most to carry forward or continue after the all clear issues on COVID? 2 simple questions, but boy, a lot of meat for discussion, especially if you take each of those questions and consider them both in the context of, all right, what do I value the most in my home, and expand it to the neighborhood, answer the 2 questions in terms of your municipality, your city, your community, your province, your country, your planet. Expand the thinking related to each of those 2 questions, I think is a worthwhile conversation, and it's something that everybody can relate to. And people are starting to talk about just those questions. And that's all I wanted to add, Trevor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. And Cora, could I just ask you to release the screen? Thank you. Jasmine.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for your presentations. I learned a lot, and I look forward to next week attending all those events as well. And my thoughts, just on some of the questions that were posed in one of the emails that Trevor sent out. Will things be different after this physical isolation? Can everyone hear me by chance?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I gave that some thought, and on the negative side, I'm worried and fearful that business will pick up as usual, and so will government activities go on as usual, and then we'll have little or no changes, especially in this heightened society. That's on the negative, because I still wonder, we're going to still have capitalism, we'll still have colonialism, we'll still have environmental degradation, racism, gender inequality. How will those still exist is where my mind goes to. Well, what level, after we all come out of this, how much thought have we really given into action to address these issues? So I'm hopeful, because I don't know if you've read Chinua Achebe, our great Nigerian writer, his book, When Things Fall Apart. I read it in my 20s and it changed my life, because if you read the book, it's all about community falling apart, but then it's the renewal and the rejuvenation that comes out of this story. And for me, out of this story that we're living through right now, is really, I'm focusing on the rejuvenation, revival, the positives that are going to come out of this, which segues me into just my thoughts on the positive as we go through these unprecedented times, is that there's community bonding happening. But what we don't talk about enough is the individual and spiritual bonding that is taking place for many people that are new in this area. I myself am a Buddhist practitioner, and so I have a spiritual lens. But I think of the lack of the spiritual discussions we're having around, and faith-based discussions of people who are lost right now. So I think that's something that we need to talk about more, along the individual bonding that's happening. Another positive is our community and global empathy and gratitude at those levels, at those deeper levels, that people are feeling empathy and gratitude by seeing what's happening in Italy and in China and all over the world. So that's where I see it as a new spiritual order in some ways, a new spiritual paradigm perhaps is a better wording that's coming out of this pandemic. And there's a Buddhist saying, when in stillness, purpose speaks. So the world is on pause, and Trevor and I have talked about that word. So as we sit and pause, what's the positivity that's coming out of the pause? And Which just brings me to my final point of our kitchen table chats. So thanks, Claire and Trevor and the rest of the board members and everyone working on that. I'm excited. What I would like to see is to have a child and youth component on it. I have a degree in education, so I also focus on children and youth, and I've worked with youth. So I would love to see kind of like cultural caretakers, or youth are future stewards of our societies, and they're the future caretakers of our communities. And I would love to see chats led by them, facilitated by them, for them, with them, where one of us could come in and organize that with them. But if we're going to move forward or roar forward, it's really about the children and youth and how do we involve them in our kitchen table chats. And I would love to be part of that as well. But that's important for me as we move forward. So thanks, everyone.
Can I just jump? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to jump in there quick. Matthias, one of our participants from One Planet Saanich, was on, and it looks like he's not here anymore. Matthias is from Royal Oak Middle School. And so we've been working a lot with schools through One Planet Saanich. So that's definitely an area where we can partner as well. And what you were suggesting sounds like a great idea. So definitely we've got an avenue with, there's about 7 schools we're working with right now. Yeah, and too bad Matthias left. So
Excellent.
yeah,
That's really good.
I'd just like to also add, if you don't mind, that we have a youth panel on Wednesday, which is actually Earth Day, April 22nd, or April 22nd. I'm starting to go batty here. I've just got too much going on right now. But there's some of our leading youth in Western Canada will be like climate organizers will be on that call, pretty much managing and speaking the entire time. So I think if you want to hear a lot of inspired thinking and action, there's actually some of them are from Alberta, Northern BC, different parts of the island. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're open to anyone who'd like to jump in. Now, there are 35 of us online at the moment, so if we all jumped in at once, it would be a symphony orchestra. And what we really need is perhaps soloists or maybe a duet. So if you would like to say something, maybe you could just say that in the chat box and I can see it so that I can give people their fair dues.
Trevor, people can raise their hand too at the bottom of the participants. They can raise their hand. In the participant box at the very bottom left-hand side, you click on raise your hand and their hand will come up.
Oh, is there a hand raising option? I hadn't seen that.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that, but anyway. Okay, well, Gertie, since you have come online, is there anything you want to add? Particularly, not just this, but I know, of course, that the spiritual dimension of this is important to you.
Trevor, also the old school method works there. There was somebody with their hand up. There.
It doesn't show up in my system.
No, actually,
Oh,
visually, her
Vic
picture.
student.
Yeah. You Vic student.
Oh, all right. Well, I started with Gertie, so I let me carry on there, and then I'll go to whoever you Vic student is.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. Well, I'm just really excited about this happening tonight, that we actually are online and there are people here, so it's very exciting. And thank you, all of you, for your presentation. Trevor, for laying out the situation that we're in today and for the responses. I really think the kitchen table is a really important one method of moving forward and getting people into conversations. And of course, my big aspect is spirituality. And I think that would be another important area as we move forward to have conversations around our spirituality and how we care for one another and for our earth especially. Mm-hmm. So thanks, Trevor. And thank you, Francis, for doing your Earth. Really appreciate that. Your Earth Day.
So I'm going to jump to Vic student, whoever that is. It doesn't have a name, so I don't know who it is. Is that Matthias?
No, this is Amanda Pat.
Oh, it's Amanda. Hello, Amanda.
Hi. The first time I logged into Zoom, I didn't know how much security there'd be, so I just put Vic Student and it stuck. I am a UVic student. I am in 4th year, Geography and Environmental Studies. I'm getting towards the end of my studies, and my summer plans have evaporated. So I'm kind of nervous at this point about what happens next. Do I get to do things at UVic? Do I magically fall into a job? What happens? And so I wanted to make a couple points. One, about how university and college students at multiple levels, undergrad, graduate, PhD, aren't really covered by the federal subsidies right now. So that's leaving a huge section of our future leaders and decision makers in a bit of a difficult situation. So there's a lot of groups that are vulnerable, but this is one group that hasn't felt completely included yet. And then I've been having multiple conversations with my faith community, the Unitarians, with UVic and the Anthropocene, with different communities around how we envision going forward. I've tried to advocate in several of those circles. We need more young people, because I'm seeing a lot of people with a certain level of comfort in that they're relatively protected if things go really badly. And what we really, really need is a lot of deep relationships in order to protect people if things don't go so well. So I wanted to highlight that whatever goes forward, we need to really, really help students and young people be a part of it.
Thanks for that, Amanda. And that makes me, I mean, the notion that we've been looking at of online kitchen table chats are ways that we can stimulate that. I mean, we're not going to provide the service exactly. We're going to provide some guides and some stimulus. But and Paula made a comment about this in the chat box. But ways of doing that with college and university students, that should be, particularly over the next month or two, once they're through any exams you have to go through, that may be a good way to keep that conversation alive in that community too. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. Although I'm at home, I and my classmates still have big final papers, big group projects, final exams online. So I've been head down. I haven't really had a chance to do a lot of slowing down yet, because I still have deadlines and, you know, papers worth 35% of my mark. So as that dies down a bit, and we have, like, summer semester is always different. There's different semesters within the summer semester, and we don't know what that's going to look like yet. A lot of field schools are canceled. A lot of in-person classes are now having to shift online. So University of UVic is not sure what they're going to run yet. So students are doubly unsure what they're going to be able to do. But there should be a break in there, a pause where we too can catch our breath and then see where our university is, where our social groups are, where our activism and non-for-profits are. I really do think in a couple weeks' time is a good time to catch up with students.
Thank you. And I've just finally figured out how that little hand up thing works and where I can see it. So I'm going to go across the line of images I have here and start with Guy and then come to Eric.
Yeah, hi folks, everyone. I just had the quick thought out of nowhere that, Trevor, why don't you approach the Times Colonist and invite them to organize an essays or people's op-ed length essays on life after COVID. And just to invite a whole variety of people to sort of post their visions and ideas, so that, because currently the journalistic focus is very, very immediate. And this doesn't get outside the box. It doesn't take us to a bigger place of thinking or vision or imagination. And you've got the Times Colonist collection, and they might be looking for something to keep their readers a bit motivated instead of just being dragged down by the daily statistics and the daily reports. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I will try it out. As it happens, I just got a note from Dave Obey, and I almost never hear from Dave Obey. But I just got a note from him, and what he was saying was, what he was doing was asking me if I would talk to some Rotary clubs, which I'm happy to do. But so if he's going to ask me a favor, I can ask him one back. Nice to see you, Guy, by the way. A nice green wall there, politically correct. You're muted. Eric. Eric, you had your hand up. Now I finally figured out that.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I've just been, the thing that I've been thinking about, this may not surprise you, people who know me won't surprise me, is the fact that we've got empty roads and people are thinking about this as a very transitory thing, but really we're probably looking at least 18 months with greatly reduced traffic volumes. And that means that we've got enough time to really have a little bit of a discussion and try some things out with all that public road space that has been used for fossil fuel powered automobiles, and actually that we could make our city a lot nicer while reducing the ecological footprint. And I also just want to note that if cities around the world did this, it would implode the share value of all these oil companies that have found themselves in great financial distress over just a transitory drop in transportation in travel by fossil fuel means.
Anyone for a community garden in the middle of the Trans-Canada? I think, no, joking aside, I think that's a really interesting idea. Sort of, maybe we get an essay on what part of the daily commute is it you're missing?
Trevor, I don't know where the hand signal is. I can find one that's got a clap and a thumbs up, but I can't find a hand.
Oh, well, I think
chat, Claire.
In the chat.
Well, I found it, if you click on participants, it'll give you a mute me and a lower hand. Just do a double click on participants, not a single click, a double click on participants.
Oh, got it, Guy, that's good.
Oh, okay, all right, see it, thank you.
so. I think I saw Monica Wynn waving her hand at me. Yeah, and she's also got the little blue thing up now too. So Monica, you'll need to unmute.
Okay, sorry, I finally figured it out. I can't put it on my image. I need to do it in the bottom of the screen. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for the introductions. Always just wonderful, inspiring, positive ideas. I had a couple of thoughts. Amanda, in response to the need for a break, another idea, perhaps you and a few other students just write a joint email to the president and to the provost and just ask for it, because everybody is so incredibly busy with the immediate emergency operations and all of those kinds of things. Make that voice be known. And if you want to copy me, I can send one from a faculty's perspective. So just a thought, maybe it would have an idea. The other thought I had, I just wanted to put this out to everybody. I just listened to a webinar by one of my colleagues at the business faculty, who is a finance professor, who did a fabulous job sort of giving an overview of the financial situation and stock markets. And I'm not a finance person, so a lot of it was fast and quick, but essentially what I got out of it was, no, there's lots of things, but let me focus on one particular piece. Because there will likely be a recovery period at the government level of several years from the recession we are bound to encounter, and the taking up of debt and at the government level, which eventually has to come back from either taxes or from us, essentially. So one of the comments he made is that to get out of recessions and to get the economy started again, and I know we've heard about what kind of economy is the question here, but he mentioned that investment in infrastructure tends to be a typical and positive thing. The question to me is, what kind of infrastructure? So again, there I'm seeing the threat of more cities, more roads, more asphalt, more whatever, you know, countering that green wall behind Guy. And on the other hand, I see, and I don't have many good ideas yet, but that's perhaps where the collective ingenuity could come in. What kind of infrastructure, what kind of investments could that be turned into so that it becomes an opportunity for structural change?
Thank you. Eric, you raised the issue of the I'm going to come, I see the other hands that are up, so I will come to you shortly. I've got Claire and Thomas on the list, but I just want to go back to Eric because, you know, obviously transportation is a big chunk of infrastructure, so is energy systems. It's very reminiscent to me, or sounds very much to me like the Green New Deal. So, Eric, you got any thoughts about that? I know you've worked with the Climate Justice Victoria and Green New Deal and on the transportation infrastructure side.
Yeah, I think that the transportation infrastructure question is a huge one. I really do expect governments to throw billions, tens of billions of dollars at highway expansion, and also to bail out the airport expansions that are, you know, these are fossil fuel, the least efficient forms of transportation. One of the things that I find most interesting is that the federal and provincial governments actually agreed that infrastructure should undergo a carbon test, that everything should be looked at through a climate lens, and they never did it. That was in their federal provincial climate agreement. It was, you know, it was just empty words. Now might be a really good time to poke very hard on that issue, and I'll put a link in the chat about that, the specifics of that agreement.
Thank you. Me go to, I'm just going to run down the list in the order I see it here. So Claire and then Thomas, I guess that's Tom Haid. So Claire.
Yeah. Yeah, something that we haven't spent much time talking about, but is, you know, what I've been reading about with, you know, our just-in-time delivery systems and food security, and bringing that into the massive biodiversity loss that we've had and been warned about, and sort of going back to, you know, looking at the questions around the impact of the way that we live. The questions about people being, so the temporary foreign workers being stopped at the border coming into the US, where most of our fresh produce comes from, that there's been discussion about the fact that that's going to massively impact the production of food in California and down in the States, which will massively impact us. And so there's that. There's the fact that regenerative agriculture and things that something I'm involved a lot with is permaculture, but it is that kind of approach to food production is very much about biodiversity, helping to restore natural systems. And if we were to think that just from a, if you're a government trying to deal with the massive problems, food security, by proposing a solution of an investment in that kind of agriculture, but also that then starts to take care of jobs and higher quality work, because you have to be skilled at being able to do that. Anyway, that is something that I've thought a lot about. It's also something absolutely essential to people who have lost their jobs. Yeah, it is another discussion as well, but my concern about if a lot of people, and I'm hearing that there is a lot of concern about job loss in this region, people losing, not being able to pay rent or not being able to pay mortgages, which puts housing into, it makes it very vulnerable. So that's a completely different thing, but I just wanted to say that that's another area that I'm very concerned about, and what that means for real estate and what we'll do to protect vultures from coming in, whether they're wealthy foreign buyers or people who've got lots of excess money buying up property. What does that do to the configuration of our communities? So yeah, I'd love to have more discussion about those two major things. So.
Well, and I think that equity issue, we've already got a project underway with the Community Social Planning Council with Diana Gibson. It's the place to bring it is probably there, and probably GVAT as well, which is very Greater Victoria Acting Together, which is very focused on equity issues. I've got Tom, then Barry, then Ted, then Gertie. Tom.
Hello, thank you, Trevor. Hello, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to then mention three things. So real estate, infrastructure, and BC Hydro's electricity planning. And first of all, I'd like to second what Claire said. And in particular, BC Sustainable Energy Association has been pushing forward a kind of advocacy around 100% renewable energy by 2050 for municipalities. And we've been doing it at a kind of high level, and without getting too much into the weeds about the political strategies and tactics. And I'm growing increasingly concerned that the manner in which the form of our community is determined has a lot to do with the amount of money that's coming in, investing in real estate, pushing sprawl, and this is kind of we haven't taken this on yet. It's very political, of course. People who know more about the municipal scene will probably know more than I do about it. But if we want to achieve these 100% renewable energy goals, at some point, I suspect this is going to be a big thing that will need to be one of those things where real conflict starts to happen, because you start to inconvenience people who are expecting to make lots of money on their plans. So that's real estate. Infrastructure, I strongly endorse what Eric Doherty just said about infrastructure and the need for a proper green screen and criteria on infrastructure. A heck of a lot of the way the federal government operates is by means of providing incentives to parties to carry out work, and there are a lot of people lining up to get those incentives who are not particularly interested in making sure the project they're working on is really contributing to reduced greenhouse gas emissions and all that kind of stuff. So to the extent that you guys are going to get involved politically or do campaigning or something like that, engaging with people who do that, this is another big issue at the federal level, really important, also important at the provincial level. So moving on to BC Hydro and electricity planning and the Government of BC Clean BC plan that was put out in 2018. I hope you all know that plan. It's quite progressive. It's a sort of worthy progress, at least in intention, beyond the 2008 climate leadership plan of Gordon Campbell. Sectoral reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, significant role for electrification, which would mean BC Hydro building, helping to electrify transportation, industry, buildings. Clean BC plan comes out and says that it wants to reduce the amount of natural gas used in buildings. So this is, at least notionally, the government is saying one of the right things. I think they're just dipping their toe in the water and needing lots of intelligent political support in order for them actually to implement this whole thing properly. Because once you start electrifying, you're going to be pushing people off of these very cheap natural gas, fossil fuel. Prices will go up. Political problems will develop. So this is, I think electrification is the way forward, if there is one, for us to secure our future. But it needs political support. I'll give an example that kind of goes back to Eric's, infrastructure boondoggle thing. The government is relying heavily on electrifying the production of natural gas. So this is a kind of sleight of hand because it does avoid increased greenhouse gas emissions on BC's inventory, but of course it's still helping to produce more natural gas. So on a worldwide scale, it's simply not reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I'm confident that there are agents within the BC government that really want to do the right thing. I'm imagining that they're under lots and lots of economic pressure to do, produce more fossil fuels, get more revenues, whatnot. So, so they're at least potentially getting at a point where there can be real sort of profoundly important conflicts and questions addressed in terms of what really is the way forward in climate action. So again, stand by for more information on this, and anyone who's inclined to get involved politically, there will be opportunities to speak out and talk to the government and media about how best this should be done. Yeah, that's
thanks, Tom. And if I, one way I would summarize that is, in addition to advocating for all the new things that need to be done with green infrastructure, we need to hold their feet to the fire that they deliver on the promises they've already made. Is that right?
Were you thinking of any particular ones there?
Well, you mentioned several, in fact. So, for example, that the commitment to 100% renewable energy in real estate, but is it really happening? The commitment to, I think it was Eric actually who raised the issue of a commitment to a carbon assessment of a green infrastructure projects in theory, but not in practice. So there's a lot of stuff that it's a policy area. I don't know if Greg is still on the call, but you know, one of the things I was going back and forth with Greg about was the extent to which the LEAP or the Green New Deal or the Green Party or a bunch of other groups that are really looking at the policy and need to come together, and common vision, common action would be another good example, where there's a number of groups that have looked at policy locally as well as provincially and nationally, but particularly locally, I'm thinking, and how do we expand? There's quite a useful platform for a policy in terms of the common vision, common action statement. We need to just take that further. So I think the whole policy piece, which from the point of view of the work we do as the conversations, is something we can bring into a conversation. I'm not sure how much we go into being the advocates for it. We're certainly not the technical experts on it. But anyway, we should think about that. I had Barry next.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks very much for making this conversation happen. I'd like to take us to a specific question, and that has to do with the great danger that the federal government is going to give a huge support to the oil and gas industry to get them back online as they see it in the industry. And one of the concerns there, of course, is all of the unemployment in Alberta in particular. It also affects northern BC, I think. But the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is that there is an alternative energy source that Alberta is quite capable of developing that nicely replaces, in a very clean way, the tar sand development, and that is the development of their abundant geothermal resources. There's a paper that was put out, and there are several, but one put out by the Pembina Institute back at the end of 2017. It's a paper called Heat Seeking, and in there they describe the resources in Alberta, in the huge basin that underlies much of Alberta. They point out that there's a whole series of abandoned oil and gas wells in Alberta, which are needing remediation, and which have all sorts of data in terms of their depths, their temperature access that they allow. And they also point out that 40% of the cost of developing geothermal energy, that is the geothermal generation of electricity, as opposed to geothermal heating of houses. Geothermal generation of electricity, 40% of that is in digging the holes or boring the holes down to the geothermally active layers. It does mean drilling to several thousand meters to get to the resource to enable the heat exchange to take place. But the point that I wanted to make was that the obvious place to put money, besides helping the unemployed workers from that area, is to put federal money into the development of the geothermal resource in Alberta. There's already a very small effort being made in Saskatchewan, but to put it into Alberta to not only provide employment, because a lot of the skills that people in the gas and oil industry have, a lot of those skills are directly applicable to the development of the geothermal industry. The application of the money in that area leads us towards a very positive future. It also allows, through the use of any kind of waste heat from the geothermal generation of electricity, allows the development of longer term agricultural development in the north. And that provides people with local food growing facilities, and gets rid of the problem of any kind of thermal, or diminishes the problem of any kind of thermal pollution of the environment in association with the development of that geothermal resource. There is a huge potential of that for that in Alberta. There's also a huge potential in British Columbia, and it could quite nicely replace the development of natural gas in BC, which requires an extensive amount of wasting of good fresh water resources in the fracking business. So I want to leave that with you as an idea. There's also at least one thesis in BC that describes the availability of those resources, geothermal resources. It's 9 years old now. The young woman who put that together is an engineer practicing in Vancouver right now, and an engineering firm. There are resources there that very, very nicely replace the resources that we do not want to continue. If we have to go back, that is put the economy back together again, there's an opportunity there we need to follow up on.
Harry, thank you. Could you throw those two reports you mentioned, or a quick summary, a quick name for them, into the chat box, and that way we'll have it on record and we can keep it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Interesting how much of this conversation is revolving around the green infrastructure and Green New Deal kind of work. Maybe we could talk a bit more about that, but I've got Ted and Gertie with their hands up still, and then we've got about 25 minutes left if we want it on the call. Oh, and sorry, somebody I need to admit. So, Ted.
Thanks, Trevor. Excellent, excellent overall, folks. Trevor right from the get-go, and comments coming in, and Francis next week. I'm going to be glued to my computer anyways next week around 11 to 12:30 every Sunday to Friday, and Cora, with all the work you're doing, working with Trevor and the like on One Planet Saanich and conversations for One Planet region, and on to Vancouver Island, right, you guys? Let's not stop at the region level. Three quick things if I can. One, just the last two of the last three comments, and Trevor, you talked about Green New Deal and working with maybe the Green Party and other progressives. I'm starting to look at the world as in three groups. One is thought leaders, second is policy leaders, and the third is political leaders in the construct of a what next after coronavirus. We're blessed to have a lot of thought leaders on this call, policy leaders as well. I think of, a number of groups, but I think Monica up at university, CCPA, the Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives, and other people that work on policy all the time, like Thomas and Guy and others, and progressive political leaders, obviously at a national level. We often think of the Green Party, but really any and all at any level that are looking at being progressive and looking at some of the elements to move towards more sustainable, regenerative societies for the long term, as opposed to the neoliberal approach we're having to follow these days. So one comment would be kind of the scale issue. At the outset, I think Claire, maybe you started, or Trevor, with kitchen table talks. So that's at a small scale, absolutely indispensable. At the larger scale is this kind of networking across Canada, or of course internationally, weaving together these thought leaders, policy leaders, etc., to bring to bear and to come to some level of consensus on a common global path forward. So that's one kind of comment in terms of scale. Second one, I hope you guys will bear with me. I'm going to read kind of one of his definitions of infrastructure, because that seems to be part of our discussions here today. I just finished reading the Green New Deal with Jeremy Rifkin, Eric and Trevor and others would certainly be aware of that, but I'm going to read it in this one quick paragraph, which touches on a lot of what we've been talking about here. So he says, we are in the midst of a third industrial revolution. The digitized communication internet, which is one of his definitions of infrastructure, is converging with a digitized renewable energy internet powered by solar and wind electricity, and in a digitized mobility and logistics internet of autonomous electric and fuel cell vehicles powered by green energy atop an Internet of Things, or IoT, platform, embedded in the commercial, residential, and industrial building stock that will transform society and the economy in the 21st century. One of the reasons for laboring on that is I think Jeremy does a good job of articulating I think he has 23 key initiatives that he talks about to move towards this third industrial revolution and the Green New Deal. And it speaks to a lot of actions that many of us are aware of, and that's kind of his packaged approach going forward. But he also has a financial overlay and draws on the European Green Deal of the past, and also the Chinese counterpart to that apparently. And his book is more geared towards the United States. So really this bigger picture of working together and having a funding package, something like the Green New Deal. That certainly doesn't have to be it, but it's just one approach to bringing multiples of billions and billions of dollars, trillions of dollars together, and some of that's moving it over from the fossil fuel industry into renewable energy, et cetera. So I just wanted to make that connection. The other one, and the last one for me, jumping up, is as you mentioned, Trevor, and being involved with that, as are others on the scientific panel with Thomas Homer Dixon of the Cascade Institute, is this cascading positive tipping points. I've only become aware of that over the last week or so. So it's very provocative. The time window that we have, maybe we have 18 months, but there's no shortage of pressure to get back to normal, like the proposed potential 15 billion to the big oil that was a Uberry that just mentioned, potential from in Canada, or the 25 billion that Trump just announced yesterday or the day before to bring the airlines industry out of the doldrums, if you will. So, there's this push to get back to normal, as opposed to looking forward or bouncing forward, as Trevor calls it. But I'm kind of wondering if food security might be one of those beginning tipping points that could have a cascading effect on other issues and send us cascading down in the right direction. There's a group that's just formed. Of course, a lot of you are aware of CR Fair and the Good Food Network in the Capital Regional District. CR Fair, Capital Regional Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable, and Good Food Network. Every week now, for the last 3 weeks, another one's going to be coming out shortly. They get together and brainstorm on where are some of the gaps, what are the opportunities, how do we address the immediate issue of local food access and food supply. There's another group that's just formed over the last few weeks across Canada called Food Secure Canada. And it's if you go to foodcommunities.ca, you'll be able to look them up. It's a Food Communities Network is what they're called. And in the short term, they're addressing the food supply issues that are being exacerbated by coronavirus, but that's their short-term focus. But then they want to turn long-term into more sustainable food resiliency, food sovereignty, food sovereignty, food security, basically, particularly at a local food self-sufficiency level, which has been touched on by a couple of people on this call. So sorry, I'm rambling on here, but those are some of the connects that I'm hearing that are coming out of this call, and with a number of the thought leaders that are on this call, and you guys know who you are, and the number of connections you have with others, both in and around our neighborhood here, as well as internationally. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Talking of particularly the energy infrastructure, one of the things that strikes me is it sounds awfully like what Emery Lovins was talking about 50 years ago, the soft energy path. So I've got Gertie, and that's the last person I have at this point that I know of with a hand up, but I would like to then invite other people who've not said anything and who may want to do so as we start to think about wrapping this up. But Gertie.
Okay, thanks, Trevor. What I wanted to bring up is the Earth Charter. As many of you might know, the City of Victoria has endorsed the Earth Charter, and several of us have been taking a course on systems thinking with Prijap Kapra, and he highlighted that too. And really, it is a vision of right relationships with one another, with the Earth, and with our democracy. It's really a guide to live into. It'd be a wonderful document to study. work into how, like for example, the topics are respect and care for the community of life, our relationship with the earth, how do we live with integrity with the earth, and also an ecological integrity. I was reminded as Claire spoke about food security. If we don't take care of our ecosystems, our food security is certainly going to be compromised. And the other area it talks about is social and economic justice. We've talked about economics as well, and that is another area. And then democracy, nonviolence, and peace. So it's kind of like a whole document. It's the most international document that has ever been created in the world. Conversations all over. And Elizabeth May was part of crafting this document as well. So it could be a kitchen table conversation, but it could also be something that we could say to the City of Victoria, you know, that you've endorsed this. So what are some of the actions that could come out of that? So I just wanted to raise that up again as a possibility for conversation. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you. One of the things we're getting a lot, I think the idea of the Earth Charter as a topic for a kitchen table conversation is an interesting one, and it probably would cover several different episodes of a conversation, which may be useful. So you just keep meeting, and it becomes almost a sort of study action group. Who knows where that could go? We are getting a lot of good resources. I know from trying it earlier in a Zoom that I was in, if you look at the bottom where the chat box is that you type in, certainly on my screen, there's a little three little dots in an icon there. And when you click on that, one of the options it gives you, the first option it gives you, is to save chat. So when we come to the end of this, you can actually individually save the entire chat, and it saves it as a text document. I did it earlier for another call. But I'll also do it so I can send it out to people if that's a problem. So are there other people who would like to contribute who've not had a chance to say anything yet? Okay, I'll take that as a no. We can open that up then to anyone else, anyone who's already contributed. I mean, I think that I'm actually quite intrigued by Guy's idea of the Times Colonist running a competition, although I'm thinking we should probably do it at a well, I think we should do it at a local scale, but I think it could also be something that could be done at a larger scale. Maybe even a kind of student essay competition if you could get some funding. If I start to think a little bigger about, you know, how would you get to this post-COVID world, this Earth Charter world, this however we want to frame that, the one planet world, that has some potential. But I think to have it written not as a sort of master's level student paper, which a lot of those student competitions tend to be, but as a blog, as an essay for or an article for a newspaper. Intriguing idea. We've got some good ideas that I appreciate around the kitchen table chats, particularly involving children, youth, people, young people at colleges and universities. Cora had a good suggestion around the fact that teachers are looking for things to do online. And so that's another possibility. A lot of stuff around the infrastructure piece, as I say, it's from the point of view of how I see the conversations as a society operating. We're not the policy wonks, the policy experts, although there's a lot of people on this call who definitely are, and that may be an interesting way for us to think about, but it's not where we're focused at the moment. But I have this nagging question of where is that focus, particularly locally. I think we've got bits of it with Green New Deal, with the LEAP, with Common Vision, Common Action, a number of different pieces. I see Guy's got his hand up, so I'll shut up and turn it over to Guy.
Yeah, there's something obviously very special and unusual going on right now. And I think there's a danger if the previous boxes we had, whether they're called Green New Deal or the Green Party or the NDP, take it as an opportunity to sort of expand their box. If there's one word that's coming out of the zeitgeist that's happening among people who have a cooperative mindset, it is kindness. And a desire to sort of help each other and work together without any thought to sort of political framing. And to capture the maximum impulse to kindness as we re-envision the world we emerge into after this, I think is something that lends itself well to the creative writing, to the artists, to murals, to poetry, because it celebrates stuff out. As soon as you get down into the weeds of policy analysis, like how are we going to stop LNG and what kind of carbon tax should we have, you're going to lose 90% of the new people who intuitively feel they want a better world or something different, but haven't been stuck in the trenches like some of us have for so long. And so the more we open up the creative, as phase one of this, creative avenues, I'm sure there'd be people willing to put money up for prizes for, let's have 10 murals put up around the city in different places. There's plenty of empty car parks with walls sitting on them. Let's have a mural contest for the best expression of what the new future could look like when we carry the kindness and goodwill and caring and the love for the healthcare workers into a whole economy. What does it look like? And then add that to, bits of fiction, bits of short storytelling, bits of poetry, bits of music.
That's a really interesting idea. It actually links up with something that I thought of when Eric was talking about empty roads, which, and I made a note to myself here, what can we do with empty roads? That could be an art project. I just could envision sort of, what's doing a mural on the Trans-Canada or on the pavement. So no, maybe not that exactly, but I mean, what could artists do with the idea of here's all these empty roads?
Artists, they've got time and they're looking for some project to get engaged in. Gertie.
One of the things that Margaret Atwood was on CBC not long ago, and she was saying, she says, I think people should start writing about their experience of going through this pandemic. Like what's going on for them individually and collectively? What are they seeing happening? And then just recently, I think it was a gallery, an art gallery in, I think in the Kootenays, is asking people to write their stories about this time, living through these times, and to write them as if somebody's going to read them. They don't have to be perfect, but I think those can be very valuable resources for people to hear people's stories of this time.
Just to bounce back on that, the Royal BC Museum, every institution like that is suddenly totally lacking purpose. Their doors are shut. If they could be persuaded to put 10 large wooden muralscapes on wheels outside and to invite people to contribute to them, then they can be wheeled around the community later on once the museum is open again. But right now they're all sitting doing nothing, and this will give them a sense of purpose and contribution to the community. Same goes for the art gallery.
Great ideas, Guy.
So can I jump in here?
Go ahead, you're an artist.
Well, I was totally agreeing with you. The storytelling is just so important right now because the story, if you think about the dominant narrative, it's been that we are a dog-eat-dog world, and really that story has, shown its face, but the artists and those storytelling needs to actually be there to manifest itself so that it reminds us that that's not the world that really rose up. In fact, so that was actually, and I have to tell you that I am actually in the process of soliciting people to submit stories that they've seen, those coming together stories, because I am actually working on an art project right now that does bring those, but there'll be lots of those. But anyway, just to say that. But on that note, working as a community artist, one of the things that I do know is that there is virtually, there's the most minuscule amount of funding for this kind of art. Most of it goes towards much more in the professional development of the arts. and very, very little for community art or something that's a lot more broad-based. And that actually speaks as well to, so the amount of money that goes into amplifying that kind of work, there's very little infrastructure or funding. And when you think about what you're up against, you know, the oil and gas lobby are massive. The you know, health sector is big. And they've got a lot more, the funding that goes in, it's well oiled as a machinery for lobbying and the voice they have. Civil society, we have invested so little into boosting the capacity of being able to put our voice forward. And we really need to be, like, I'm speaking from the trenches of that, but we need to be aware of when you don't put any resources into that, it, you know, yes, we come together, we've had this great session where we've got this brainstorming happening, but it's mostly all done on the back of volunteers, and there's only so much effectiveness that you have. We need to just keep that in mind as well. And I agree, we need to get the artists putting that forward and capturing it, but we also need to be funding and making sure that we have something that's able to compete with the well-oiled infrastructure that we are up against. So,
thank you, Claire. I'm going to ask Francis to respond in a minute, but I am going to go to Wendy. Is it Wendy?
If you mean me, it's Anne. It's actually
sorry, I'm just seeing, all I'm seeing on my screen.
You're seeing W. Yes, sorry.
W Carol.
Yeah, I'm using my spouse's computer here, sorry. So anyways, Anne Pridesby. Well, thank you everybody for your contributions. They've been marvelous. One of the things that if we're going to build on with this cascading, and you use the word virtuous, which implies value, and one of the things that we've seen with COVID-19 is a value shift away from, you know, the reliance on the market and more toward, and something that's very competitive and dog eat dog, people said that, well, something is more compassionate. Suddenly we started to care about, let's say, the level of care that our elderly people are being provided in nursing homes. There's light on many things, and now that we haven't seen before in a living, and so there's been support for that. Or people who can't pay their rent or their mortgages, there's support for that. So I think we have to seize this caring society we've suddenly realized was underneath that marketplace society that we are, and now has emerged. We can care about the environment, and we can care about each other. And so how do we not lose this moment? So that's in fact what drives human activity forward and creates the political will from this otherwise horrible disruptive moment. And we have building blocks. People have cited so many building blocks that we have already. So how can we do the connection? I mean, everybody here is such a great resource. How can we put that together? What are all the things we're already doing on the island that are compatible with that compassionate, sustainable way of living? And how do we keep those things sort of coherent, have them cohere, so that we don't lose this moment? That's what I'm saying. And maybe what we need to do when we can all meet together is invite all of those forces, whether the NGOs, whether they're youth programs, whether there are local farmers, to connect with each other and see what kind of political will we can muster for a new sort of leap manifesto or continuing now. Anyway, those are just trying to tie the million things that have been said today.
Thank you. I'm going to draw this to a close quite shortly. One of the things I always try and do is finish on time. But Francis, since we've gotten into a whole lot of stuff around creativity and artists and so on, do you want to comment on that at all?
hang on. I'll be super quick here. I know it's 7 o'clock. I can hear all the banging and clanging going around me here in support of the care workers. I would say that really just stay tuned. I think that Creatively United is just teamed up with Climate in the Arts. We're bringing forward ways to, in partnership with this wonderful connection we've created, to bring the arts more into climate action. And prior to COVID, we had relationships built with the Pacific Opera, the Symphony, all kinds of sort of high, yeah, there you go, Ted, way to bang. With all kinds of great organizations that we're really going to bring climate messaging forward in their programming. And so we're now looking at different ways of doing that. And so a lot of the ideas presented here, brilliant. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Stay tuned. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think this has been a really positive experience as an experiment, and obviously we may have to do it again online. I would want to emphasize that from the point of view of conversations, our focus is to be face-to-face. And this is sort of face-to-face, but it's not really, obviously. So while we'll use the online for now, I don't anticipate that that would be a major part of our approach going forward. We will stick to trying to get people together in groups to talk to each other, to build community. And through the kitchen table conversations and through other ideas that we have kicking around, the charrettes is another form of that face-to-face conversation. I'm very grateful to all of you for being on. I think it's been a really worthwhile experience. The whole thing has been recorded, so anyone who wants to sit through 2 hours of it is more than welcome to do so. I will post the link once I have it. And I will also save the chat box and would encourage you to do the same in case my saving doesn't work. Anybody got any final thoughts or comments before we close this down?
Remember Earth Fest starting this Sunday. And yeah, you've got to register. It's free, but you have to register. So make sure you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.
See you Sunday, I hope.